What's going on, everybody? This is the Blockchain Backer, bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we'll be taking a peek over here at the Bitcoin price chart as we get ready to end the month over here for the United States stock market, coming off of a dramatic start to the month. As you all may remember, when the Federal Reserve released their FOMC statement on the last day of July, sending the market straight down into the 50-week moving average there on August 5th. The stock market will be making its monthly close today, and each of the indexes have various candles and structures. Bitcoin and the crypto market, of course, won't close their monthly candles until tomorrow night on Saturday night. If it were to close right here, it would be the lowest close we've seen in 6 months. However, just like we saw over there in the stock market, Bitcoin also bounced off of its 50-week moving average back then on August 5th. Prices have really just remained stagnant since that has happened. However, holding after that capitulation and that mass liquidation throughout the cryptocurrency market. Price is not acting inconsistent to what we've seen happen before after we see a massive volatility spike, just like we saw back then in 2020. We've done those analogies many times. Last week, we went into detail on some of these altcoins to show how back in 2020, the altcoin market did the same thing. It had not gone into expansion at this moment, which is what was going on there in March and April of this year. For things like Matic, it's a long range. This would be your last phase of Wyckoff, as we had there for the altcoin market in 2020, and then met with a massive volatility event that happened in macro markets, which we've also experienced here this go around as well, which was this moment right here. Back then in 2020, that of course was the official starting point for the bull run in crypto. Whether you look at it through the lens of Bitcoin or the altcoin market, that was the starting point. And as we all know, with how long we've been in this, with the peak coming in back in 2021, we're approaching that time right now. We're living in the moment of whether or not Bitcoin's going to continue going on the exact same time schedules that it's been going on for the last 1,230 something days. And if we're going to end up seeing this market expand for Bitcoin there in the earlier part of September. That, of course, is likely going to be dictated by macro deciding to go and the Russell 2000 having to break out, which it still has yet to proven that it's going to. But as we near this point here for Bitcoin approaching the longest it's ever taken, it's our longest example that we have. The bear from 2011 to 2013, the bear from 2014 to 2017, the bear from 2018 to 2020. This is the longest example that we have. And for Bitcoin, that lands you somewhere around September 8th. And of course, this thing has operated right on cue the whole time, from peaks to crashes to breakouts and more breakouts. This, of course, is also the post-super cycle correction for Bitcoin, and everybody should be familiar with the super cycles by now, but if you're not, we've now done 3 super cycles of this magnitude, and of course the 2018 through 2020 correction was precisely the same size as the pit stop of the 2013 correction before the top came in. It even had all of the same phases happening in here, from size of crashes to corrections and ABC structures in here. Size of the correction and an ABC correction in here to ultimately lead onto a bull, followed by the post-super cycle correction, which is what we keep showing in here and what all of this is right in here. So for a completed post-super cycle correction, this is why we look at this. And again, just goes back and reiterates the stuff that we're talking about in 2021 when people are like, no, this has to go a lot higher. Reiterating that was the final portion of a super cycle. So it would make sense to have a correction that would last this long. It makes sense to have a correction that would look like this. But of course, we're all waiting to say, will the market dish that out? Will it allow it to continue and go on and do another one and have macro cooperate, which it has for every single cycle, either leading the way or happening in concurrence with Bitcoin and the crypto market? So certainly a fingernail biting time as we approach this to get really close to it. One of the things that would have been a little more reassuring to see is if we actually saw some action start to wake up in the rest of the market this month. This was written about in the newsletter for August and discussed in Markets in the Morning this past Wednesday, that post-capitulation, we've actually seen the market show signs of waking up by now. In 2017 and in 2021, the timing of the expansions actually were identical when it came to the cryptocurrency market. post capitulation. As you can see right here, the altcoin market has now gone beyond the longest it has ever taken for a market to recover post capitulation. Back in February, March, April, May, June, heard a lot about banana zone, right? Don't really hear too much about it anymore. And that's because when we did this back in 2017 and 2020, by the time we got back to retraces, the market pulled back and then entered parabolic growth. That, of course, hasn't happened because we haven't had expansion or an opening of breadth happen in macro markets. However, by the time we got here into what would be equivalent to those cycles right now, which would have been August, this is really the period where the true expansion took place that was consistent between the past two cycles. Also, when we look at it through this lens, showing it not being March, April, May, June, or July was also evident in all of this as well. And still, August being the place of interest. We're talking about all throughout here because we can go back to 2017 and live in that moment to see that this was when things started to wake up throughout the altcoin market. That it was essentially years on end of nothing going on. Like when we're looking at Litecoin right here, Bitcoin completes its post super cycle correction. It gets right in here. Suddenly, boom, we see a big wake up happen in the altcoin market as we get ready for expansion to kick in. And if we're not really precise with these things, our eyes just say, no, look, they're going at the same time. But no, that's not true. You could see it actually kicked off quite early. That life started to come into the market before we got out. And we could see that right here, post-capitulation, we're crossing through that window right now of when we've seen that life wake up. We have never gone this long before, post-capitulation or in a cycle, and there not being evidence showing up in here for expansion to kick in. Even if you add 2018 through 2021 on top, post-capitulation, by now you're living in laser eyes, diamond hands, Elon Musk. Doge has already gone on a massive rip to the upside. Bitcoin's already gone from $4,000 to $58,000 as Litecoin is over here knocking back near the highs and the altcoin market cap is pressing on the all-time highs. Already way out of here. And that's what August really represented back in 2021. The escape of the all-time high for the altcoin market, the expansion banana zone of 2017. And all of that kicks off right here in this area. After that volatility, 33% correction, the same size correction we've seen in Bitcoin, life just started to wake up in here. And that just so happens to be the same amount of time that we've been in right now. And still, it hasn't happened yet. A couple of days have passed, but of course, my eyes still just continue to gravitate towards there being a risk on trigger to happen in all markets for the crypto market to do that, which we still just haven't had happen yet. I created a video last week really talking about a surprise having to happen because when you look at the pulling forces that are happening between markets, you actually have every bullish case that you could possibly make for the cryptocurrency market when it comes to things like this or things like this. Or even things like Matic, like we're talking about, completed Wyckoff accumulations, doing the exact same thing that marks a bottom that was the thing that kicked off bull runs. The exact same structures and safety trade dominances that scream this is how bull runs kick off. But the pulling force of macro not cooperating. And so I keep looking around trying to say, what could the surprise be? And like even mentioned in the video, a surprise is technically exactly that. It's an unexpected or astonishing event. It is not something that can be predicted. But of course, the speculator in me wants to constantly be looking for it to say, could I figure out what that surprise could be? And I don't know. I don't know if it'll be positive. I don't know if it'll be negative. But what I could do is look at this and say, how much time does it take for this thing to continue doing what it's done for over 1,230 days? What's occurring around here around September 6th, September 7th, September 8th? Well, remember, like we started the video, there was a series of events that took place that catalyzed the markets back at the beginning of August, starting there with the Fed on the 31st, followed by unemployment data released there on August 2nd. Then becomes the worry of if it's going to be a 50 basis point rate hike. At the same time, Bank of Japan raises by 25 basis points. You had kind of like a cascading worry all happen in there that there was going to be a massive amount of cutting happening, not due to a soft landing, but that there's going to have to be aggressive rate cutting in order to stop the snowballing effects of unemployment, as the unemployment rate has been gradually ticking up, and as we missed unemployment with expectations of 4.1% in the United States and instead coming in at 4.3. And as you can see here, gradually climbing and climbing and climbing, reaching levels from back in late 2021. The range of low unemployment has now been creeping to the upside. And last month, a big miss, with also revisions to unemployment, showing it as being worse than what has been represented. And so we're left in this period where the stock market has not shown evidence yet of whether or not it's going to expand or reject. We're at a period where catalysts can arrive, whether they're positive or they're negative. And with us reaching that milestone there around September 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th for the cryptocurrency market, and rate cuts expected there on September 18th, I get drawn back to this data. Inflation does not seem to be the topic anymore. We registered a 2.9 finally. That is the first time for us to have a 2 handle on the front of CPI. But all eyes are on, are we in a situation where there's going to be runaway employment? And if there is runaway employment, that's always meant a recession is coming. And so this market sits in a stalemate, waiting to see if it can expand or reject after the last hard move down comes after the FOMC statement indicating that job gains have moderated and the unemployment rate has moved up. Then, 2 days later, unemployment shifts up even higher, missing the forecast by even more, then triggering worries of bigger rate cuts. Not to pump your bags, but to stop a recession from spiraling out of control. And so on the economic data front, if that's the surprise, right? If it's not some crazy surprise of like some geopolitical event, but what if it's some type of like economic surprise, right? Economic data. Well, what shows up at that time? What shows up around September 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th? Well, we're going to get the next unemployment report. This is the last unemployment report before the Fed is supposed to start cutting. If unemployment beats forecasts and pulls down, that would be a positive surprise to the market after 4 consecutive rises and 4 consecutive misses of expectations. In addition, just a few days later, there on September 11th, we're going to get the next CPI reading, the last CPI reading before the Fed is supposed to cut. All year long, we've talked about CPI. We talked about how it was going to stall out. It wasn't going to go much lower. We were going to hang out there because it was going to be difficult to knock out a lot of the lower readings that were already built into the year-over-year forecast. However, once we got near the end, before we got to elections, we'd suddenly be able to start knocking out bigger numbers from the year-over-year readings. That starts with the next CPI reading, because our last ones have only been 0.1, 0.2, 0.2. They get knocked out of the year-over-year readings. The next 2 are the big ones. When we get our next CPI reading, we're going to be knocking a 0.5 out of the year-over-year figure for CPI. CPI sits at 2.9% right now. When we get our next reading, and if it's anything consistent with what we've seen so far, even if it comes in at a 0.3 or a 0.0 or a negative 0.1 or a 0.2, we're going to see that year-over-year CPI drop from 2.9 down to 2.7, 2.6, 2.5. And if we end up hitting like a negative 0.1% for the month over month, we would see year-over-year CPI drop from 2.9 to 2.3. And so if we get a really positive unemployment reading and then a positive CPI reading where unemployment pulls back, the upward trajectory stops, and then CPI is finally only a couple of tenths of a percentage points away from 2%, is that where the market finally feels comfortable at? And all that data will snowball in on September 6th and September 11th, right as we're getting into our period of where things have happened. Now, we've theorized on different ideas of being like, well, if the altcoin market does start taking off here, which hasn't happened, maybe the ending comes the day retail investors YOLO in and buy once the Fed starts cutting. I'm less confident that that would actually be the ending now with how long things are taking to play out. But still, it being in that range, whether that's the specific day or if the weeks after that end up being the ending. The reason I say that is that if this thing were to continue, still, my expectations would be there's going to be life waking up in this market. In an expansionary phase, if the Russell is to expand, it is not going to be Bitcoin solo. Nothing in this market implies that's what would be the thing that happens. It would be a broad rally throughout all of crypto in that event. But still, to understand that even if there does become a big rally in here, that rally would still completely fizzle out right here, which is still just like a couple weeks into October. Then it goes back to months on end of trash, altcoins pulling down massively, and likely at least another 35 to 40% correction in Bitcoin after that. So if these dominoes fall and this thing expands and the whole market expands and the Russell expands and nobody's fighting with each other on Twitter anymore, but everybody's holding hands singing Kumbaya, to just remember those things typically last weeks to maybe a couple of months. And then we're right back into it all over again. So if these things happen, I go through it with my mind of what that would be like as a retail investor participating in this market and hanging out on social media. It's that if this played out, how would it be, right? What would the psychology of the market be like? It would be like Bitcoin gets back to all-time high, unemployment pulls down, then CPI comes in at, let's just say 2.5. Then the Fed ends up cutting and the market is ripping. Here we are just several days to 17, 18 days post-Fed cut, and that's where the market completely fizzles out and stops. But that would not be the sentiment over there on social media. That would not be the sentiment over there on YouTube videos. It would be that we're just starting, right? We finally have the 2 print on CPI. Unemployment's cooled off and the Fed is cutting. We have Bitcoin ETFs, Ethereum ETFs. How dumb could you be? Why would you in any way be essentially selling here? And to understand that when all of this did occur, that was the play to make here. The play was to essentially get out of everything right there. Let Bitcoin do a 40% correction. And then the altcoins really stalled out really for the remainder of the year until finally the end came. Bitcoin ran from like $1,800 up to $17,000 and the altcoins really did nothing during that whole time. So if there's some massive rally that shows up market wide in here, still the idea is that if that played out, keeping in mind retail sentiment will be like, we got the 2 handle on CPI, we've got unemployment pulling back, we got the Fed cutting, we got Bitcoin ETFs, Ethereum ETF. How could you dare be bearish right here? Just remember that. And to remember that the crowd will always be euphoric at the peak. So will that be the surprise or the unexpected and astonishing event? Well, by definition, you can't predict it. But if we look at the things that are coming ahead of us and how that would shape retail sentiment, it's really the only things within my control that I can look at to try to paint a picture of what it would be like in the event that unemployment comes in and registers like a 4.6. We likely have an entirely different picture on our hand, and that would be quite scary. And so as we inch closer and closer and closer and cross through the longest period of time that we've seen before a market wakes up, it's certainly in the edge of our seats time period. Altcoins are officially a couple of days beyond the longest it's ever taken, but Bitcoin still has about a week and a half left on it. And we just so happen to be getting a tremendous amount of economic data coming in with the Fed cut, setting up the perfect sequence of events to create euphoria and draw retail investors in, which unfortunately and ultimately is always the case to get them to buy the top, just as the last 2 cutting cycles did. Cut, euphoria, crash, cut, euphoria, crash. And to understand why that matches time, it's like implying we're right in here. If that came next, this is what the altcoin market did. It ran with it, and then nothing happened with the altcoins for the next 6 months, right? That's XRP right there. That's Ethereum. And the whole thing came to a stop right here, which based on what we're talking about, I take these off with Bitcoin, right? It's like this thing could only last, 45 to 60 days. And the market would be convinced that we are just starting based on the narratives of unemployment, CPI, and the Fed cut. But really, that's just the last hurrah of excitement, at least for an extended period of time, at least for altcoins. We'll have to take a peek at Bitcoin at that time, because Bitcoin was certainly the show-stopping event after that. But right now, it's about focusing on the next phase. Because even in this circumstance, it's a 38 to 40% correction for Bitcoin after that. So when we're looking at it through this lens right in here, that's not much time. And if we get blessed with it and lucky beyond belief that it ends up happening, we'll go from what the market is today, which is worried, to excited, to super ridiculously excited. And it'll all happen really fast with positive narratives at the same time if that's the way things play out. And like always, in every single circumstance, the time to be a seller is when there is that extreme euphoria and the entire crowd says you're wrong. I think we all know that. And so I'm just trying to map out what could that look like. And well, hopefully that's the way it goes. So we'll see how the month can conclude itself over here for the stock market. It's a positive day out there in the stock market. Nothing to run and tell mom about. No breakouts happening in here. We'll see how the month closes. It could probably be volatile up to the last minute since it will close out the month after a huge volatility event that took place during this month. There's probably going to be a lot of algos trying to manipulate those candles to close out the month. And then as we get ready for September, it's our big month. Unemployment, CPI, Fed cut. We'll see how it goes. So on that note, we are now reaching the end of August, which also means we're reaching the end of the summer. I would say once again, summer tends to do what it typically does. And what did we get? A cruel summer. But September ushers in fall, which typically marks a turnaround in markets and in businesses. And well, goodbye hot weather. But also with September 1st coming, there will be a new newsletter posted tomorrow. You can check out all the current ones over here at blockchainbacker.substack.com. Tons of research has been put into this. I do also audio record all of these where I will explain the charts to you as well. If you'd like video tutorials to teach you how to set up your own charts and indicators within TradingView and CoinTrader Pro, you could check out bcbacker.com. Like mentioned, teaching you how to set up your own charts and indicators within TradingView and CoinTrader Pro, along with teaching you about common and effective tools, Wyckoff accumulation structures, ranges and patterns, Elliott wave theory, and the historical behavior of the cryptocurrency market, along with a downloadable PDF to supplement a lot of these different sections. There are links down here in the description of this video to bcbacker.com and to the newsletter at blockchainbacker.substack.com. Otherwise, have a wonderful weekend, and I'll catch you guys in September. Oh, and just a reminder, Monday is Labor Day in the United States, and the stock market is closed. So enjoy a 3-day weekend. But that's it. Thank you so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you could be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.